feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the DaneMoore NBA podcast, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming at you Monday morning, it's January 5th. The Wolves won both of their games over the weekend. They beat Miami in Miami by 10 on Saturday, and then on a back-to-back in Washington on Sunday. The Wolves also beat the Wizards by 26. Those two wins come after the Wolves' worst loss of the season in Atlanta on New Year's Eve. Clearly, this team still has some of the immaturity to them where they need to touch the stove to, realize it's hot and play with energy, as they did not do against Atlanta. But I also thought these two wins over the weekend were two kind of mature wins, two of their more mature wins of the season. I got Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick here with me, and we'll get into the many things that really worked for the Wolves over the weekend in the vacuum of the weekend. But before zooming in, I'm curious what you've sort of made of this last week in the aggregate, maybe even going back to the Wolves blowing out Chicago 4 games ago. I mean, the last 4 are blew out Chicago, got blown out by Atlanta, beat Miami pretty handily, and then blew out Washington. What do you make of the Atlanta one being in there, and what do the other 3 games around that, I don't know, detoxify that?
Yeah, I didn't put too much into the Chicago one, just because of the way the Bulls, it's one thing to not have guys, it's another thing to lose guys during the game, which they lost Kobe White, and then they lost early in the game, and then they lost Josh Giddey early in the third. Chicago can play without those guys, but it usually takes a plan. And so when you just don't have them, I think that you're not going to play great basketball. We saw them really fall apart when Giddey was out. So I didn't put that much into that one. And then I saw the Hawks one, and that seemed a lot more like a continuation of the Brooklyn game. And that was yes, this team has flaws in general, sometimes that we see, and it's not like this perfectly put together puzzle, but that a lot of it was so effort based on their part, where it's just you're not even getting any type of crisp performance here, in terms of effort, attention to detail, all of that stuff. And it's these are losing efforts. And we saw a couple of those, and they were clearly frustrated by them. And I think it's just a reminder of that I think refocused them of yeah, okay, we can't keep doing this. And a couple days in a row of seeing oh yeah, that's even for not being this perfect basketball team. You see the good product that they can put out there, and how things can even things that you think are issues can still work when they are executing, when they are, game plan detail, when they are playing with effort and energy. It's everything looks 10 times better. And it's another reminder that it's in there and they're capable of doing it at least a couple times in a row. But I think you're right. I think it's a great example of yeah, they do let it slip, and then they do have to really suffer because of it. And then they're oh, okay, hold on. This, we can't do this. And then pull yourselves back up and recover and play 2 really good basketball games, I thought. I know the Wizards stink, but they played really well yesterday, and they obviously played well in Miami. That's not an easy place to win, not an easy team to beat this year. I definitely think it was a case of a wake-up call in Atlanta, and kind of figuring out, okay, that's not acceptable, and going from there and correcting course rather quickly. It's never as much as it seems the sky is falling, and ever is for the Timberwolves. We've covered this team long enough. It's never they're going to suck these next 10 games. They don't do that. Right. It's and that is what tells you usually that it's effort based, right? When you can easily pick it up. We talk about all these other things, how are you going to figure this out? How are you going to figure this out? But so much of it is when they fail, it's effort based. Right. When you can correct it that easily. These are warts.
Kind of nice.
Yeah. I mean, that's a luxury, right? It's this guy that tells you that the sky's never falling. It's never these unfixable things. You know it. But I think that's what makes it more frustrating for fans and players when it goes wrong is okay, it's probably effort-based. Why is it effort-based?
Right. Well, I think it helps too when an effort-based loss is followed by a super detail-oriented, like you just said, couple games following it. That reminds me of the 23-24 Wolves. When they would lose, that team lost to quote unquote bad opponents a lot more than this team does. They, that was a year where they would kind of let the energy slip again when the opponent wasn't up to snuff, and then they'd lose. Maybe they'd lose 2 in a row, but wasn't that I asked this last week too? They never lost 3 in a row, right? That team.
Correct. Yep.
from the 23-24 season.
Yeah, they didn't lose 3 in a row until the playoffs against Denver.
To the
That's the
playoffs.
first time they lost 3 in a row.
Yeah, so I think that's as discouraging as the Atlanta game was, and I think the vibe that came out of that and Ant leaving the floor and all of those sort of things. I thought the swift turn back to playing. I thought the Miami game was their best game of the season outside of Oklahoma City. And I mean, maybe there's a couple other ones close, but I really liked how they looked in that game. I think that was a competent opponent. I think it was a good defense. And I went into that game going like, I don't know, this one's probably like 50-50. I could, maybe just see myself taking Miami here because they're the home team. And the Wolves, I thought, looked really good, took care of business there. I say that to mean like, it's okay to have over the course of an 82 game season to have games like the Atlanta game, provided you can respond like they did this weekend. And I think we talk about the lack of energy and effort and some of the frustration in the fan bases. It feels like when they haven't played with energy and effort, it hasn't always been as good of a response the next game, or I don't know, it's a little bit more delayed. I feel as good about the Wolves as I could 2 games later following the loss on New Year's Eve to Atlanta, even given how bad that Atlanta loss was. I thought they played really well this weekend, especially against Miami.
Yeah, I think it helped for them that you lost to Atlanta. I think they've had some other low effort games where they've squeaked out a win with like a fourth quarter or whatever. And it's not necessarily a wake up call at that point. Or then when your next opponent is somebody you don't really respect, you're like, yeah, okay, like got to play better than that, but not that much better. I think heading into Miami, they had a pretty good idea of like, if we do what we did against Atlanta, we're going to have the same result. Going to get smoked again, going to get embarrassed. This slide's going to continue. This is what's required to beat Miami. I think they respected Miami, gave Miami like their best effort and, like full attention. And yeah, that was critical. And we've seen that many times from them of like, okay, this opponent deserves our respect. But doing it again, doing it 2 nights in a row, I think was the most encouraging part for me. Like, I know Washington stinks, no question, not a good team, but they really like came out and controlled that game from the start.
Yeah.
And like, hey, that's a travel back-to-back on afternoon-ish game, like early evening, not super easy to do. And they just went out and they played the way they were supposed to play. And they did it in pretty good unison. Like I think doing it 2 times in a row was really impressive. And that's where it's like, okay, there's more sustainability in here than I think we've thought. Right. We haven't seen much of that. Like even like the good performances, the best couple games you could say they played this year were like home Boston, home San Antonio, like that weekend. And that's about it. There haven't been many things where it's like multiple games. It's like, okay, yeah, now they're rolling. They found something like that. I do think when they do play like with the necessary effort, I think maybe we're seeing more evolution that can kind of be hidden sometimes when they don't, where it's like, oh man, nothing's getting better. It's like, no, I think things are growing, but when you don't even play, like when you don't bring what's required to win, then it's going to look like it's all getting worse, when I don't think that's necessarily the truth. I do think they have some things that aren't perfect, but are improving.
I think why the weekend felt so clean and good was because Edwards, Randle, and Gobert all played well in tandem, I thought, in the same game. Like I thought all 3 played well and had a serious impact in the Miami game at the same time. And I don't know how many times all season we could say that about all 3 of them.
Right.
Even just how many games Ant and Julius have both played really well in tandem. There's few of those this year, but all 3 I thought that was like probably my number 1 takeaway from that Miami game. I mean, Ant has 33, 3 and 5. Randle had 23, 10 and 4 against Miami. Rudy had 13, 12 and 1. All 3 of them super efficient and effective with their offense. And then they basically just duplicated it maybe. And then we're even a little bit better against Washington at the next game. That is required, that they have that gear where they can go to all 3 of them and get a good game simultaneously. That's required to be, having that gear is required to be a contender. And they showed it this weekend. And I thought It was really impressive, and it made like the vision of this team make a little bit more sense to me, where I go, okay, so if all of them are going well together, what do I really what can I really even nitpick here? I don't there wasn't much to nitpick because Randle filled in for Edwards as Rudy filled in for Randle. You know, it just felt clean. It felt like a clean, all the pieces of the pie were in there, and they had a full pie there. That's I don't know. I mean, if they go on a little run here, I'm going to remember this as like, okay, it feels like this is when they all started playing well in tandem, or even showed that they could all play well in tandem. What'd you make of that?
I think that we've seen for a while now, a couple weeks, that they are playing more Ant off ball, like within actions. Like not necessarily that he's not the one bringing the ball up the court, but there's just more of it. There's more actions in other spots, and then Ant's on the second side, or the things just Ant's coming off the ball and attacking in that way. And I think he's getting more and more comfortable with it, and the team's getting better with it. And I think that maybe is leading to Ant even like, because the way he's shooting the ball right now is insane. The efficiency numbers are insane. I think like,
oh, good.
I think it's pretty sustainable too, with just like the way that he's getting some easier offense than he's gotten in the past. Like he's not having to work as hard for all of it. And I think it's been like a slow progression that we've seen them leaning more and more into offensively, but it's almost like quiet, like you just don't even think of it as you're watching it. But I definitely think he's not always having to direct and run all of these actions himself on ball. And I think he's just getting better and better, more comfortable game after game of like, oh, okay, here, like I get the ball over here. It's catch and shoot threes. You're taking more of those, or just like some of these, like you see Washington, like, oh, okay, like I'm attacking out the catch here. Like this, it's easy blow by and there's no help. So it's like, it's a layup. I think we're seeing more of that, like the rim percentage. He's clearly a better finisher. He's talked about working on that. A lot of the ease on these are significantly easier. We've seen a lot more of like blow by layup, nobody at the rim this year. Because in the past, that just didn't exist within their offense. Like every time Ant got to the rim, it was Ant off the bounce, like usually pick and roll or whatever, just trying to take his man dead on with the stacked defense and trying to finish over two. And you're going to shoot a lower percentage. I just think they found ways to get Ant easier offense. I think he's accepting it more and more, and he's just getting more comfortable with it. And I think that's kind of everybody's benefiting from it. And you see like, oh, wow, like Ant within this type of system is like, truly this insanely unstoppable, efficient offensive monster, where he's obviously always been great, but you're just seeing like right now it looks way easier even, which is
it's monster status.
Yeah,
it's not just like awesome shooter. It's like what do we do here? And I think it's because of a lot of the spacing. It has been better, and a better understanding of the offense. We've talked about Rudy doing a little bit better job of staying out of Ant's way in attack situations. Julius effectively spacing himself, and spacing with intention. You know, like having moving the ball naturally spaces you out a little bit more. So then when it's been moving and it gets to Ant, now an attack is just cleaner. And sometimes it's just the blow bys to the rim. But I do think the threat of the mid range shot is also leading that defender to not really just be able to like sit back in one-on-one isolation. Like Ant will take that one dribble snatchback mid-range shot, and it looks great. It's clean. It looks easy, and you got to be scared about that as the defense too. So I do think it's the easiest offenses looked for Ant. I think certainly in these last two games, or maybe even over the last couple of weeks. And to your point, I think it's just a better offensive approach, and I think the Wolves as a team are settling more into how they need to play offensively. As the beginning of the season, it's a little bit of the like passing the baton from Randle to Edwards to, okay, somebody else's turn here. I feel like Randle's even fit into that kind of nice too, of like understanding where his spots are to attack while also giving Ant like as much license as he needs to be a monster. I don't especially Randle and Edwards kind of folding in together, I thought was especially encouraging this weekend. And the numbers of Ant was last night. He was both games over the weekend. Ant was 8 of 11 from 2, and last night he was 6 of 10 from 3 as well. Just offensive monster.
It's like you don't even realize how many points he has or whatever. And that's where I think you get to be like a truly elite scorer, is when it's like quiet 30, quiet 35 or whatever. Like, not saying it's quiet, he's dominating the game, but there aren't just like these isolation, step back three that makes like the crowd roar or whatever. But you're like, that was tough. You had to work for that one. You're not seeing as many of those. So it's like, oh, wow, 35. Like, I didn't even know he had that great of a game. But it's like, but he's doing it so efficiently, so easily, so smoothly, that's when it's like, oh, you're a really high end scorer now. And like, I'm not even sure what you do with this. That's when it becomes just more automatic when you enter that tier of offensive player. And I think Julius is even getting there a little bit more with like the assist numbers, where it's like, oh, he has 9 assists tonight. Like, oh, I didn't even know that was the case. Like, I think he's just getting a little bit smarter too of, yes, like he's kind of got varying roles in the offense depending on who they're playing, like, and maybe getting better at picking that out. Because there are some games where it's like, yeah, you should dominate this game. And there are some games where it's like, no, like, this is an Ant game and that's okay, or whatever, or it's just a move the ball game. Like that, I think
Miami is a good example of that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right, sorry. Bam Adebayo is guarding Julius. Like, let's not run 15 ISOs here, but and they didn't, and they profited from it. I think that's exactly what you're talking about, and that distinction is even coming into like focus in the last couple of weeks. I mean, I think the Memphis loss a few weeks ago was very similar as an opponent to the Miami one. And why did they lose that game? Because Jaren Jackson Jr. dominated the Randle matchup, both sides of the floor. And that's why some of my skepticism coming into the Miami game is I was like, all right, Bam versus Julius is going to be hard for Julius to be really. You're not going to just be able to go Julius. And they didn't. And he just kind of like fit in for, what did he have in that one? He had 23, 10, and 4. And he was 8 for 11 from 2 in that game. Like, that's the Julius. And that was clean, and it fit in next to your monster as your number one option. Yeah, I think that, but to your point, I think it's hard. I think that the Julius reading this,
right?
Like, we're playing heliocentric basketball with Ant, but also at times we're like turning that off, and now it's like, all right, maybe we're just moving it here, or maybe we're turning it off to play Randle heliocentric. Like, we talk about Randle when he's being ineffective and inefficient, and when teams are giving him problems that are causing turnovers, but it's not an easy read. His role night to night is not like known in advance and just do this thing over and over again. He's got to feel out the game. He's got to feel out Ant. He's got to feel out, is Rudy playing well this game? What's Jaden doing? I don't think that's an easy role for Julius.
It's hard because when we talk about like the Memphis matchup and like, oh man, what's he doing? Like, obviously there are other ways you can play offense, but I'd imagine when you're in the game, you're like, I've got to stay aggressive. Like I can't just like get super passive here. Like, my team needs me to be aggressive, and identifying within the game like what that means though, I think can be a little bit of a challenge of like, aggressive for me in this matchup means this. Because otherwise I think you could be like, okay, I don't have this one. Oh, I should get off the ball. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, why is he just standing in the corner? He's not doing anything. Like it's a fine line to walk there. And we all know like, oh, pass, cut, do this, like spark movement, maybe like a punch a gap and kick. But it sounds awesome, and it's what we want everybody to do. But it's just like, I think in a game where you're getting frustrated and you're like, how do I fix this? It's like, I got to stay aggressive. I think that's an easy thing to fall into, of like, I got to keep trying to get us through this. And you just do it the wrong way. And it's not necessarily like it's bad intentions. And I think we've seen the same thing with the Ant. Like, I'll get us out of this. And it's not like bad intentions. It's just bad process. But the more that they can stack together these good performances, and especially good performances against good defensive teams like Miami, then you just are more readily know what answers are. And I think we all thought that would come right out of the gates this year, right? Because they played last year, and, continuity, all of that. But each team's a little different. Each offseason you come back a little bit different player, all those kinds of things. So while I think it'd be better for them if they started off on the right foot, like I said, I do feel like throughout the year when they play hard, they are getting better. That can, I don't keep saying it, but that sometimes gets disguised by games where they don't play hard. So you think they're getting worse. But I think their best efforts, their best performances, I think are getting a little better every game.
I don't want to cut the Rudy piece short. I want to talk about him
Sure.
with a little bit more detail. So we'll grab our first break, and then we'll be back with Jace. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. I want to tell you about how you can pick games over at Prize Picks. Now, you can pick winners of a game. You can pick against the spread. You can pick more or less on total points scored in a game, and you can even do futures. Like there are currently odds up right now for who wins the Super Bowl. The Seahawks are the favorites according to Prize Picks. To find these picks, go to the Teams tab on the top of the app, because the app defaults to players, where you're used to picking more or less on a handful of different stats for players and putting together a daily lineup that way. But the Teams tab works to pick on the games. I just thought with the NFL playoffs here that it would be good to know that you can now pick the games themselves now at Prize Picks as well. If you do not yet have a Prize Picks account, maybe you want to play Prize Picks for the NFL playoffs, all you have to do is put in the promo code Dane when you sign up, and you'll receive $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. That's prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app using promo code Dane. All right, back with Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick. We're talking about Edwards, Randle, and Gobert all playing really well in tandem together over the weekend, which I think is the story of the weekend. But this Gobert stuff is something, man. Like, I think 2-3 weeks ago, you and I started talking more, or recognizing more offensive skill development from Rudy. Maybe it was a sequence of games where teams are putting 2 on the ball on Ant, and it just kind of was forcing the Wolves to play through Rudy in the short roll, right? Like that's the thing that we've commended Rudy on a bunch, is understanding to play the short roll, how to find the guy in the corner, even to score himself sometimes on the short roll. And Rudy's skills, I think we all agree in that specific area, have really grown in his time in Minnesota. What I think we're starting to see over the course of maybe the last 6 weeks overall is just skill development coming to cash in for Rudy. It sounds, these things always sound funny to say, but as I left that game last night, yes, it was against the Wizards. Not an impressive performance, but I wrote down in my notes, like, Rudy's hooping. Like he's
as you've written many times. As you've written many times.
I have not, but you know what I'm saying? It's just like his confidence is up there, right, and he looks like a basketball player. He looks like a 7'2", like awkward basketball player, but he looks like a basketball player in more fluid motions in the way he's passing. Obviously, that rip through dribble sort of thing where he went and finished and dunked on Alex Sarr, like that's a basketball play. And I don't expect that to happen all the time, but these little sort of pockets of finesse, athleticism, skill showing up is really an interesting thing to me, because he did not have those skills when he arrived in Minnesota 4 years ago. I tweeted about this last night. We do this thing pretty much across the board where when somebody hits their 30s, they are what they are, and it becomes a question of how long can they stay healthy enough to remain in their prime. You know, that's really the question for guys in their 30s. But with Rudy, what's happened in his 30s is he's been developing skills. Maybe because he just didn't have them earlier. It was just so long. It took him so long to be able to develop these things. But offensively, Rudy's skill set is just better than it was when he got to Minnesota, and better than it was last year, better than it was 2 years ago. When Finch spoke post-game last night, he talked about this being the best Rudy's been since he's been in Minnesota. And I'm not sure I totally agree with that, because 2 years ago, he was so good defensively. And this year, he's just like maybe one so good. But offensively, he is a lot better of a player than he was 2 years ago. And certainly from an offensive skill set, his standpoint, so much better than he was when he was in Utah five years ago. It's a cool thing. It's been a really cool thing to watch develop. And clearly, he's profiting from it individually, but more importantly, the Wolves offense, I think, is profiting from the idea that he's just not a 0 out of 10 in the skill department anymore. It's not an 8 out of 10, but it's not a 0 out of 10. I think it's a really cool story.
Yeah, defensively, just the quick. You mentioned that he's probably not as good as he was 2 years ago. I don't know if that's even true. I think some often with Rudy, it's like how good are the players around him? Like he's this great, floor raiser no matter what. But like there were so few straight line drives that somebody had against Minnesota 2 years ago. So it's like everything that's coming to Rudy is somebody like having to work to get there. And now like you don't have a full head of steam heading to the rim. Like good luck. And now Rudy, there are more matchups where Rudy has to really like compensate. So I think sometimes it can be like, oh, Rudy not great tonight. It's like, what is Rudy supposed to do on some of these? Like I agree to some degree, but it's nobody's making his life any easier. Some of these games. But then
can I give you one distinction I'd make on the defensive thing?
Yep.
What will always stick out to me about Rudy's defensive player of the year season 2 years ago, and why I very much felt he deserved it that year, was he was so good at the end of games.
No, that's
why he always closed. Yes. And he like won games that way. So
I agree.
That's the one thing that keeps that year above it. But you're totally right in the bigger 48 minutes sort of thing is he doesn't have as much defensive personnel. 2 years ago showed that Rudy is insane if you have 4 good perimeter defenders who can contain the ball around him. But that's the one difference I would make there. I don't know, man. Rudy might win defensive player of the year this year, though.
Maybe. I think that'll be, is he deserving or will he win? I think almost two different arguments. I think we could very easily be like, he should win player of the year by the end of the year, defense player of the year. Well, he's not going to, but he should. Offensively, I'm with you. Like, I think there are a couple things at play. Like, I do think he's just more naturally getting the ball more frequently, more naturally, like within what they're doing. They're playing a lot less possessions where it's dribble the ball for 14 seconds and then, all right, what are we going to do? And don't have much here. Time's running out. I'm just going to whip it to Rudy. And then I think the opportunities are coming more frequently, more naturally. But then also, like, he's talked about this many times, just being more aggressive. And I think a big part for him being more aggressive is like having an intention of what he's going to do with the ball. Like you mentioned that SAR play, like that is like I know where I'm trying to get to and I'm going to do it. The worst Rudy plays we've ever seen is when he gets the ball, takes like 2 steps, and it's like that wasn't even towards the target. Now you've found yourself in no man's land, and that's where we see like the throw it up and it's 3 feet left of the hoop, and it's like oh my god, I don't even know if I
because he shot the same shot as if he was
as if he was straight on. Like it's not enough.
That's where I was trying to go.
It's like you're a big physical guy. Like I don't even care if you're not dribbling. Like take your 2 steps towards the hoop. Like I just think when he talks about aggression, that's what I always picture in my head of aggression to getting like I'm good at this and this. Like I don't care if somebody's in my way. I have to get to that or that, like, and just being more intentional and aggressive about getting to the spots where you can score. And like he's better in the short roll of decision making and whatnot, a little bit more methodical, not as rushed, all of that type of stuff. But when there's a scoring opportunity or when you like your matchup around the rim, like do like the 1 or 2 things you're really good at. And sometimes I thought it was so tentative. Like you get the ball and it's almost like he was thinking about how he was going to try to score, and it'd be like, I think you might be farther away from the hoop than you were when you took these 2 steps, and now you don't know, you're real no man's land, and you're just kind of chucking at the rim, like, or towards the hoop. The rim would be generous. And so I just think that's been a big thing. And I think confidence is a big part of aggression, of like knowing you can do something is when you're more likely to do it again and again. And it just looked like such a tentative player so often. And I don't know, I think you're right. Skill development, like how much work he's put into it, probably builds up confidence. I think the way the team has played has built up confidence. The messaging that they've tried to give him has built up confidence. But he just looks like a more confident player, and skill development's a big part of that. Doesn't matter if you can't do it. But he clearly can do it when he is aggressive and has the mindset to do it and is smart about it as well. Like it's all kind of wrapped into one.
It was kind of like big brother, little brother playing one-on-one.
Yes.
French
big brother's like 6 years older, obviously he's gonna win,
It felt like that. SAR, I watched a ton of Wizards, but like shown real flashes as an offensive player this year too. You talk about a couple of shots that weren't at the rim but at the basket. That was SAR trying to score over Rudy yesterday. He had nothing.
The Wizards are one of those teams where it's like, you've seen the Wolves do this, but the Wizards do it more. Star gets stuck and nobody's moving for the Wizards. They're like, it's your shot, this possession,
right.
you know? Like, and so he's like, okay,
You're the closest to the hoop.
Yeah, right. Like, you guys gonna help? It's like, why? Just shoot it. Like, as he's just getting swallowed up, and it's like, I'll throw it up there somewhere. We see the Wolves do that sometimes, but the teams like the Wizards, it's like on certain nights, it's 90% of the time, and it's usually when you provide a lot of defensive resistance, and they're like, I'm not doing this tonight.
That was kind of their energy the whole night in all areas. I'm not doing this.
You know, make it hard. I mean, that's so many of these games. Like, if you provide that burst to start, and you bring it to start, you can really crush a lot of these teams. And then they're like, I'm not doing it. And it so often is like when you come out a little lackadaisical or feeling the game out, and then they're like, oh, okay, we can get into our stuff tonight, or I can get my bag tonight. You know, like then they want to play. You know, and then it does turn into like, hey, everybody out here is getting paid. You know, but when you make it hard and it's like, we aren't good enough for this, well, let's shut it down. You know, that's when you can have fun in the game if you're the Wolves, and they did that last night.
We've done a lot of talking about the non-Rudy minutes in the last few weeks, and I do have a couple of things I want to talk to you about there. But I don't know if I've done a segment all year on the non-Ant minutes, and that's important to talk about, because the Wolves are really good this season when Ant hasn't been off of the floor. And I think there's a other side of the conversation to go to here, where it's like, okay, the defense is a lot worse when Ant's been on the floor this season. And that, you know, that's part of the reason there. But I first want to focus on the piece that most other teams with players, star caliber players like Ant, have serious problems in the non-Jokic minutes, the non-SGA minutes, the non-Jaylen Brown minutes, the non-Brunson minutes. I wish I would have gone through and actually pulled up what all of those net ratings are, make sure they're actually negative. But when Ant is off the floor, the Wolves are like an egregiously good team. They have a net rating of plus 9.2.
That's really good.
Really good defensive rating. And obviously, this isn't like a small sample size. Like, Ant doesn't play 15 minutes a night. You know, I don't have how many minutes it is, but it's hundreds and hundreds of minutes that the Wolves have played without Ant. I think some of it is juiced by the beginning of the season
games against some bad teams, for sure.
Yeah. And so it's somewhat juiced up by that. But point being, even if you remove those, like the Wolves would still have a positive net rating, would have outscored opponents this season with Ant off the floor. And I think we should just talk about that as like a weapon that this team has. Is while maybe they don't have as much depth as we thought going into the season, they have found a way to cover themselves well, specifically in the 12 to 15 minutes, whatever a night, that Ant isn't on the floor. And I think that's a important thing to acknowledge, and a weapon for this team.
That 9.2, just to put in perspective, that would be the second best net rating in the NBA, behind only the Thunder.
Yeah.
Like that's like dominant basketball. And I'm glad you're putting in this light, because like so often when you bring this up, people want to think like, oh, you guys are crapping on Ant. It's not. Like it's not, in the sense of just like, it's okay to acknowledge that they play well. Like, that is such an asset to your team, that you play well when your star player isn't on the court. And the biggest thing I always want to put to bed is that Ant's teammates suck, because that gets discussed. And maybe this is just a social media thing and I should just buzz off, but like, it so often is like that, oh man, like he's got nothing out there. It's like, these guys play really good basketball. There's a lot of still good basketball players still on this team. I think the roster is maybe a little bit worse than it was a couple of years ago. And like losing Nikhil mattered. And so like, I think it's fair to say that it gets a little bit worse each year, but it's still really good. And these guys, they're guys who understand what they're trying to do out there, and they work pretty well in unison. And like you said, like Julius and Dante and these guys, like they do have a really nice rhythm together. And then they play just kind of like a different brand of basketball when Ant's not out there. And it's not like the best version of the Timberwolves. Like it's not, but it's something that they can do repeatedly against a lot of teams. I don't know if it works well against every team. If you have like a really good ball pressure defense, maybe you can bog them down to where the ball movement just stops because it gets too difficult to get into anything naturally. Right. But they're fun to watch a lot of times when Ant's not out there in a different way. And that it's like, this is good basketball. Like they're finding ways to maximize everybody out there, even when the skill level isn't maximized. So it's like, it's a fun gear for them to hit. And like defensively, it's almost like they know like, okay, we have to really lock in on this end. Ant's not out here right now. It's a major asset. It's something that they'll probably have to lean on in the playoffs of like, it's usually going to be against like Ant's minutes are frequently going to match the other team's best players' minutes. So can you win the 10 to 12 where neither star player is out there? You're giving yourself a really nice cushion. That can be the difference in why you win games.
And that's probably why the numbers are as good as they are now, right? Is because when Ant is off the floor, that's also the time in the game when Jokic is off the floor, when they play the Nuggets or
they were matching
Jace off the floor.
They were matching that pretty intentionally, like the Denver game. They don't always do it. Sometimes it's like your rotation's your rotation, but a lot of times these guys play the same rotation. Jokic also plays the whole first quarter and the third quarter. Like Steph Curry does a lot of that, or did in the past. Paid too much attention this year. Like a lot of star players have that same rotation. So like he's going to match the minutes of the other team's best player a lot.
Yeah, and it's good to win those minutes, and it's something if you're winning them by a lot, as the Wolves have thus far this year. I do want to talk a little bit about how much worse the defense has been with Ant on the floor, because that's part of the driver here. I mean, 107.4 defensive rating with Ant off the floor. When Ant is on the floor this season, the Wolves defensive rating is 117.6. That's particularly driven by the team's defensive numbers with Ant on and Rudy off. So you got Ant out there in the Reid-Randle minutes. The defensive rating there's 125.3. That's what is really dropping Ant's individual defensive rating, is the Wolves do not play good defense when he's out there and Rudy isn't. I think that's more on Reid-Randle than it is on Ant, but he's not helping solve that there. But even with Ant on and Rudy on, the defensive rating is only 114.1, which is the worst of Rudy's two-man defensive rating pairings. So I do think some of this is just the fact that they play better defense when Ant's on the floor. It's also one of those, I think, Finch low-hanging fruit type of things, or more meat on the bone. If they just start playing better defense overall when Ant is on the floor, like, this team is better. That Ant is good enough of a defender in this team context to have a better individual defensive rating than 118. Ant's a better individual defender than to allow the Wolves to have a 125 defensive rating when Rudy's off the floor. It's totally one of those things, like we were talking about with the rebounding, where Ant, when he recognizes it's a thing that they need more of, he'll go get more rebounds. It would help the Wolves if Ant turned on another gear defensively that he has. If he was like, okay, Rudy's not out there, we need more from me. Maybe I'm at the point of attack here in these minutes, whatever. But the Ant minutes on the floor this season have not been good defensively, and that's part of what informs the non-Ant minutes thing. And just we should acknowledge that too.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing about Ant is the defensive stuff. And I get it, like, it's a fatigue thing. You can ask a lot of somebody. But, like, there was a game where Jaden was out. I don't even remember who was against within the last couple of weeks. And Ant clearly decided, okay, I'm the perimeter defender tonight, and played some really good perimeter defense. A lot of effort and intention out there. And it was like, yep, this is what he can do. And then it's just a reminder of he doesn't do it a lot. He doesn't win it. You can say he doesn't when it matters most. And that's a big asset. And that's important. And like in the playoffs, you'll get a better, higher version of defense. But that is where it's frustrating of like, you could probably do it more often than this. Because part of the reason why, like defensively, like you can say he's not helping him. Part of the time he's the problem, or a big part of the problem defensively. And you don't want that out of your best player. Like he probably wouldn't want that. And so yeah, if he could become more consistently giving B efforts defensively, they would be better off, kind of regardless of lineup construction. And rebounding is the same thing. Like you said, like I think everybody knows this. Like every time they play the Thunder, he has a lot more rebounds than when they play somebody else, where he's like, yeah, somebody else will get it. He's very much just more intentional about what's required to win tonight against some of these teams, and then the same in the playoffs too. I just will always stand by that. If you do it more consistently in the regular season, you'll be able to carry it out for 4 series in the playoffs, where otherwise it gets more exhausting because you haven't been consistently doing it all year. That's always my line of walk, and that's the complaint that I think has stood. I think he's done a lot of awesome things offensively. I think he's done a pretty good job accepting an offensive evolution of the team and is seeing the fruits of that. I think defensively and a lot of those little things haven't really come along this season and are maybe worse than they were 2 years ago.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Harry's, and I think it's so great that something like Harry's exists. Remember back in the day when we had to go to the store to purchase razor refills, and those razors were always so expensive, they were locked up in that box. I think in addition to it being a high-quality razor, it's just so convenient with Harry's. The best part might just be that price point. Harry's owns their own world-class blade factory in Germany, no outsourcing, no middleman. Because of that, they keep the entire process from steel to shelf cheap. Harry's can keep the cost low. Why pay $30 for refills when Harry's gives you better blades for a fraction of that? They just sent me a new handle for this blazer. It's made out of metal. It's heavy, and I think it keeps the razor itself feeling new. It's a barbershop quality shave with German engineered blades. If you don't love your shave, if you try it, Harry's will make it right. No questions asked. A risk-free trial means there's zero downside to giving it a shot. For a limited time, our listeners can get the Harry's Plus trial set for only $10 at harrys.com/DaneMoore. The set includes the all-new Harry's razor, one refined 5-blade cartridge, and a 2-ounce foaming shave gel, and a travel cover to protect your blades on the go. Just head to harrys.com/DaneMoore to claim this offer, and after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. The one last thing I want to hit on the non-Ant minutes is it does seem like they're really targeting specific lineups for that. And I think that started once Bones really got cemented into the rotation. Bones is subs in for Ant at the start of the second quarter. Ant plays the whole first quarter. Bones subs in at the start of the second quarter. Ant plays the whole third quarter. Bones subs in at the start of the fourth quarter for him. So he's a staple of the non-Ant minutes. Naz Reid is always out there in those minutes as well, which kind of makes sense. You know, he's 6 man. He comes in and he's kind of in for that period of time. So it's always those two. And then it's a choice between Gobert and Randle. More often Randle. McDaniels or Clark at the 3, and DiVincenzo or Conley are out there at the point there. But Bones and Naz have been a big driver of the offense, specifically in the non-Ant minutes. And then they're getting enough defense by having McDaniels and Clark. And I think Conley helps a lot defensively in those non-Ant minutes too. But part of the reason I think this is working, or that you could believe that it will, these numbers with Ant off the floor will sustain and not just be a product of the beginning of the season when they were racking up some wins in game by a lot in games that Ant missed, is that I feel like they know what they want to do now, you know, what they want to get to in those minutes from a personnel standpoint. And they didn't know that at the beginning of the season, when that's often when Rob would be subbing in for his first time, or TJ would be subbing in. And it was just the sort of the chaos of those non-Ant minutes, digging deep into the bench and not finding anything. I think Finch knows what he wants to get to in those minutes, and the team is benefiting from that going.
What do you think about what they should have? Like we've seen like Ant in the bench minutes, and obviously there's going to be like a starter out there with them. But what have you thought about the lineups that they do try out there, and what would your ideal be if you're like, hey, 5 guys play with Ant, maybe Rudy's not out there, whatever. And maybe that's what signifies non-bench, or maybe it is like Rudy's out there, but Dante and Julius and Jaden aren't. You know, whatever. Like, what's the best way to construct it? What do you think of what they have now? Because if I'm honest, sometimes there are games where they trot out a lineup, and I'm like, okay, it's Ant, Rudy, Mike, Jalen, and then somebody else. I don't know. And I'm like, okay, right. This kind of devolves into like Ant isolation ball. Mm-hmm. With 3 guys who are not really built to just stand and watch and be threats while just kind of standing off the ball. They are more like probably succeed in movement basketball. I think there are better options out there, but I haven't put too much thought into like what that would be. Do you have any of like, I think maybe it should be like this, and this for those, like, this is still more of a bench lineup, but that maybe would better fit guys around Ant to have it succeed.
So Ant's on the floor, but guys are starting to sub in.
At least two starters.
So,
at least two starters.
Yeah. So kind of like at the end of the first quarter and at the end of the third quarter, and then maybe in the fourth quarter when he comes back in, it's a mixed lineup. To your point about the offense kind of bogging down into isolation in those moments, I think the counter action would be to have your best movers out there, right? I think Nas and Dante would be ideal pieces to have out there when you're talking about, some of these more broken lineups without the starters. I think that's part of the issue, though, when we talk about like the bench or the need for a point guard or the need for a scoring wing or something like that. I feel like it's in these minutes that you're talking about is where the Wolves personnel feels deficient, right? Because Dante, like, I think you can get by fine enough if you got offensively, if you have Ant, Nas, and Dante out there, even if Julius is off, right? But Dante starts.
Right.
So like Dante isn't out there that much. So to what you were saying before, it ends up being like Ant and Nas and Jalen Clark and Mike Conley and, maybe
a starter
Shannon
usually
or something. Yeah. Or maybe,
usually it's
maybe
over
it's
maybe
a
it's
starter. Right. And it just doesn't have the same offensive juice. And I think that's probably where this team just lacks some offensive juice in personnel. And I think the thing you would look at to say is like, okay, Bones, maybe play Bones in there would give you a second offensive creator, but they're using Bones for all of the non-Ant minutes. So you'd start playing Bones a lot. We've seen that in some games. If you wanted to have him out there with Ant a little bit more, but now you're talking about a pretty big drop off defensively. If you've got Ant and Bones as your backcourt, you're not going to be containing the ball well. Not like I think as much as Bones and Ant love playing together, I think they kind of best fit when one's out on the floor at a time. But who knows, man? Bones keeps impressing me. Like maybe it's something you could step into, and maybe then you just need to protect that more. And it's Ant and Bones in the backcourt, but you've left Rudy in there, Jaden's still out there, and Nas is out there, and you feel like there's enough defense around that. But it's kind of the perfect example to me. I don't think either of us have a clean answer of like, it sort of highlights the lie that this team's balanced, in some sort of way.
It's like whenever you try to cover one hole, you create another, like the leaking ship. I think what's interesting to me, I was thinking about different players. Like, I think it would be good actually if they had, and this is maybe even for these minutes, like offensively, like, okay, it's going to be more Ant isocentric in these spots. Do you have like a guy or two that you can actually like stick at a corner and be like, they're actually very comfortable and confident and they're okay with this? Like being a corner spacer like Dallas had with guys around like a Luka and Kyrie. Like, I don't think Minnesota has those. Like I know Dante can hit shots in the corner and whatnot, but do you remember when Malik Beasley went to the Lakers and basically just stood in the corner? Like he was terrible. Like he's just much better like a movement player. Like maybe it wasn't even always just like coming off screens or whatever, but just like moving around the perimeter, more comfortable with that. Like there are different kinds of shooters and whatnot. And I've always wondered like, okay, Ant seems to kind of like playing this way and they're moving away from it a little bit. I think they're finding a better balance with it, but there are times where I'm like, yeah, I think it'd be nice, if you're going to do something with Ant isolation at the end of a quarter or something, if you have somebody who, no, they actually like standing in the corner and waiting to see if it's spacing there and giving Ant Max spacing and comfortable catch and shoot, even if they haven't touched it for a while or whatever. Like those players exist. The Wolves, I don't really think have any, which is kind of a weird part of their roster construction. I'm not saying it's bad. Like all of their guys can do a little bit of everything, but there's no just like pure I stand here and I shoot the ball. And there are some times where I think that would help spacing issues, even when you think like a lineup is offensively deficient. They just like, I think that could be like a little bit of like they help fill that because they provide the spacing that it can even just kind of be more dominant by himself.
Right. Who does it at all? Like who stands in the Jalen Clark, right? That's the only guy.
Yeah. Like, right. And that's not, he's not good at it, because
I just looked it up and he shot Yeah, that was the idea. That was the optimistic idea of Jalen Clark, is that he was going to be able to hit 40% of his open corner threes.
Right.
And
Mike Conley's one of the best at it, frankly.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Conley, yeah. But they normally in those minutes
that's not
have Mike
him.
initiating the
exactly.
offense.
Right. That's the whole point of all of it, is that there's nobody who's pure that, when that does exist. And obviously those players come with their own warts that you're sacrificing. But that's one of the random things I've thought of things that if you're like, oh, if you could add this, like you could put.
You know what Rudy would say? Rudy would say that Ant should reposition to the corner more.
Yeah, I get that. I'm saying more like when there is like an end of quarter,
just like a role player.
Yeah,
right?
yes, like that is what they do. They don't have anybody where it's like that's what they do.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it's a good thing to highlight, because yeah, Jalen Clark and Jaden McDaniels would be the two guys who would find themselves in that position most often, because they're probably the guys who are the fourth or fifth option on the floor most often when they're out on the floor. And the Wolves are like actively doing things to like not have that be the majority of those guys' offensive diets, because it's actually not what either of them do best offensively. Jalen is kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, but he's got a little bit of that like off the bounce from the corner, I'm going to throw my chest at you at the rim and, see if I can get a hand. What makes more of those than I think when they're happening. But it's like, he's not. Most teams have guys who are in the corner like yes. I'm hungry, like I want it, like give me this, because I know I'm going to make 40% of these at least. If you're
the old Reggie Bullock,
if you're looking for
standing there, like
yeah. They don't know. I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing to highlight them not having. And I think it's also like a reason to be like, all right, like Jalen, second half of the year, like this has gotta be something that you develop if you want to be in the playoffs rotation. It's 31% from the corners right now.
That's bad.
That's
good
really
looks.
bad.
It's almost always good looks. Like that's
right. You're not, if it's March and he's 31% from the corners, they're gonna have red X'd him out of the playoffs rotation. I think. No, it's a good thing to highlight, but no, they don't. I don't think they have certainly not a classic Reggie Bullock type of guy there. And so, I don't know, maybe it's something to think about with the trade deadline too, of like there's guys around the league, or I don't know, even like Juzang,
Yeah, that is one person who I've actually thought of off their bench. Like, and there's probably 10 other things that Johnny can't do well that why he doesn't play, but that's one person where I'm like, he could fit that, and maybe, I don't know. I don't think it's like a great idea to be like, oh, okay, there's 30 seconds left in the quarter. You go space. You haven't played all game. You'll make this shot. Right. But like it's guys like that. I'm not saying like play Johnny Juzang, but I'm saying like guys like that do exist still in the NBA. And I always think that I wouldn't be surprised if Ant would like a few more guys like that within the rotation every now and then.
Luka certainly likes guys like that.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, it's a great example. Yes, Luka loves guys like that. That's what they wanted. Like Dallas, it's like, pretty sure it was like a clear mandate. Like you stand in the corner, you stand in the corner, stand there and be available.
We could go through all of them. Yeah,
and it's not like the way that the Wolves want to play offense, but it's like sometimes Ant's going to get into these gears, and sometimes he has matchups where it's like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And if you can have somebody who is maximizing that, because the second that there's like overhelp or anything, like they're going to capitalize. I just think it's just like a nice option to have that the Wolves don't, that in the future, maybe it's trade deadline, maybe it's the offseason or whatever, like they oscillate a little bit that way.
Mm-hmm. Last thing quickly, just because I spent like all of last week ripping on the non-Rudy minutes and you're talking about how I feel like they're untenable, and I still feel like a lot of that against good teams, the Reid-Randle minutes in the front court, I don't have a lot of faith in against good teams. But I do got to acknowledge, like, when they play well in those minutes. And I thought this weekend it looked and felt a lot better in those non-Rudy minutes than I had thought. A week ago, I thought, especially against Miami, against the zone, I felt like they got to good, smart offense there, and in both games more than survived defensively with Rudy off the floor there. Now Miami doesn't have like a dynamic pick and roll player. They don't really run pick and roll in that sort of way that would expose them. And then the second game was the Wizards. But yeah, I wanted to note that those minutes I thought were good over the weekend. And I also wanted to note that I think Finch and the coaching staff is doing more to protect those minutes defensively by Jaden McDaniels and or Jalen Clark being out there when Rudy's off the floor. And that at least has to be the half measure. I think we've learned is until, whether it's this season or next season or whatever, until they have a Johan Berenger to plug into the rotation to give that group rim protection, or until they trade for one, that group needs defensive protection. So you have to have McDaniels and or Clark out there, and you got to let go of playing without Gobert and without McDaniels and Clark out there. There's way too many minutes of that, I think, over the first 30 games of the season where Rudy would be off the floor and Jaden and Jalen would both be sitting next to him on the bench. I think that's for sure not tenable, but there's probably a middle ground here where, especially if Jaden's out there, that they can play defense fine-ish with Rudy off the floor. And I thought this weekend they did.
Yeah, it's always funny. Like, we thought that they found that solution 10 games in, right? It's like, well, here's how you do it. You play these guys. And then they just stop. Yeah. and then they go away from it. It's like every time that they would come out of a timeout, you'd be like, ooh, this lineup's going to get torched. And then it got torched. And part of that is because, like, these aren't just bad defensive players. Like, sometimes they're not like high energy guys either, like on that end of the court. So like right. We've seen small ball where it's like it can work in little portions because guys are just like busting their ass, like they're going, like flying around the court, like doing everything they can, being scrappy or whatever. And it's like, well, they don't have scrappy guys out there either. So like, I'm not sure what the plan is. Hope the other team misses, and then hope the other team doesn't try that hard to get the offensive rebound. And that is not a winning strategy. So yeah, I agree with you. And it's a little bit baffling that they went away from that. But yeah, it's a half measure. You're right. Of like, this will fix some of it. And it's the defensive rating maybe doesn't have to be that good if you could score some alongside of it, but it can't.
And they do score.
They do score. But it can't be every time down. They're probably going to score, and if they miss, they're probably going to get the rebound, and then they're probably going to put it back in. But it's like, oh, okay, like so you're always getting the ball out of the hoop. So all of your offense is coming in the half court, and like you're going to have a couple possessions where you don't score, and then that goes the other way, and it's like that's when you get into a thing of like, this is the worst. This looks like one of the worst lineups in NBA history. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't know why they went away from it. I think maybe they've realized that has to be a permanent solution. But sometimes they do get in. I think so much of it was they were just trying to pop guys in, and we haven't gotten this guy his 4 minutes this half. We haven't gotten this guy this 4 minutes his half.
Yep.
And so that it was like, well, now's the time we have to get TJ his minutes, or Rob, or whatever. And it'd be like, okay, that leaves you with a really awful lineup here. But I guess, yeah, you're checking the box.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that was a part of it. Maybe they can get into like more firm solutions of, well, we know who's playing and when we're going to play them, so we can stick to the lineups we actually have more faith in.
Yeah, and I think that's something that they've found or committed to. Like, these are the guys who are playing now. Like, this is the bench is same starting five, but the 6th man spot is clearly Naz Reid's. The 7th man spot is clearly Bones Highland. The 8th man and 9th man are Jalen Clark and Mike Conley there. And those are the 9 guys they're playing. I think they feel good about those being the 9 guys that they're playing. And then, then you kind of, as those surrounding players like Mike Conley or DiVincenzo or Highland or whatever, when they're out there, you have a little bit more awareness of what that group feels like when it's out there, what you need to be more intentional about it. Whereas I would imagine for like Terrence Shannon Jr., when he was in the rotation, probably like half of his minutes were with Rudy out there and half of them were without him. And he's already got 15 things going through his head of what he needs to do to like not screw up and have a good performance here. And it's in the top 15 is probably not like acknowledgement of Rudy Gobert off the floor. I just do feel like there's a little bit more of that there, and yeah, they need at least that half measure, and maybe that half measure will be the answer for the season, because it's not like addressing backup center won't come with a cost, whether it's in draft picks or players on the roster. If they can last week when we talked about like experimentation time. Like, even if it isn't experimentation time by February 5th or whatever the trade deadline is, like, have a good idea of what you feel like you can get by with and what you can't get by with. And maybe part of that is experimentation, but part of that, like, really get to know your roster this month in the way that I think last year's team really got to know itself well, because they only played 8 guys every night. You know, there's a cost to that. You're not developing some people, but you get, does that make sense? Like, you get to know that, to know that group better. And I think, maybe that half measure will be enough. And it allows them to be like, well, we're going to go get a bench scorer, or we're going to go get a backup point guard, because that's more of a need than backup center is because of Jaden's presence out there, whatever. I'm not fully sold on all of that, but it was a good weekend. It was a good weekend for that group for sure.
Yeah, you do need like a couple weeks now of like, you settled on that 9. You're right. How does Jalen Clark look next to these guys? Or how do these guys look next to Jalen Clark? How do these guys look next to Bones Highland, like, who's still relatively new to the rotation? Like, you have to get a firmer understanding of, okay, this is consistently deficient, or this is consistently a real strength that we should play into with these lineups out here. And you don't get that until you kind of establish a rotation. And every team is trying to establish a base rotation. Some teams are so comfortable in what they have that they can mix around more because they've had what they've had for a while, and they know what that's going to look and feel like. Minnesota's kind of like, Jalen Clark still relatively this year is new to the rotation, and it was minutes were, up and down, and Bones is obviously fresh into the rotation this year. So now you actually do have to get comfortable. Those guys have to get used to playing with who they're going to play with, and you have to see what it looks like. And so I think that time is maybe now. And like, there's TJ's out right now, so like there's no even thought of, do you got to mix TJ in or whatever. So if you decided Rob's out, you can really go in with these 9 guys. You can, if you want to, be like a minute or two earlier, later here with subs because we don't like the way this lineup looks or whatever. This is the time to figure all that out, because maybe you finally have some stability here, barring injury, for the next month or so, or a few weeks before you go, okay, this actually isn't going to work, or this looks solid. We can get by with this.
Do you think Mike is permanently in the rotation?
Yeah, I think the only time he wasn't was that one game against Brooklyn. If you remember, he was questionable for rest that day, and then they said, and then he wasn't. Then he was active, but I kind of feel like it was a rest day where they just didn't mark him as out. Like, maybe like, hey, we need you just in case something happens.
That's what I was asking. I don't remember. There was another game he just DNP'd too, right around there. I think, but he's playing. He's been playing, and it seems like this is the 9. That would be the one I would kind of put a question mark by, or obviously Jalen Clark too. You have a little bit of a question mark by when Shannon comes back, or
both of them, frankly. I think when Shannon comes back, I don't know exactly what they would do, because they have been pretty set on trying to give TJ minutes. Like, remember, he was definitely in the rotation when he hurt that foot against Denver again. So will they do it again? Will they say, okay, this is something we'll work back?
It's gonna be interesting, right?
Later?
Like,
yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. They just seem like they've been so in on it. I don't know if they would just be like, you're not in the rotation. I don't know. I often
they just go, it can't be both Dillingham and Shannon out.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just a rule.
I don't know. I don't know if they have any like hard rules. I don't get the sense they do of like, this has to happen, but I don't know. But TJ is like, I think they've always kind of viewed it as like, but if this did click, we think it could be more of a well-rounded solution for everything. It just hasn't at all. So I don't know if they would go back to that, or if they'd be like, this is late enough in this season that maybe we'll circle back on this in the offseason.
You'll get an opportunity when somebody else who's in the rotation gets hurt.
But you're not getting forced in right now. Especially, it'll probably always, of course, depend on how the team's playing too at that moment in time.
Yeah, they were just so in on him, and I frankly kind of was too, and maybe that was all of us being overzealous about a 25-year-old who I don't know, maybe that proved to be misguided trust in Shannon, but I am kind of with you, and even in myself, kind of like, I'm not ready to just say like Shannon's done, like that's that. This is who he is, because I also don't think he's gotten enough of a healthy opportunity this season to really, not like he played 15 minutes a night for 18 games,
Right.
before. Yeah. So
And the whole thing is they
haven't
haven't benched him at any point this year. Like they haven't done that. They've been nice where he doesn't get the second shift, but he's not been like out when he's been healthy the whole time.
That is true. Yeah, he probably has no DMPs.
I don't think he has any of those. I don't think so. I'd have to look again. Maybe he has one, but I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I mean, he's got a lot of like 3 minutes and 38 seconds,
Right,
but
right. Yeah.
one shift in the first half, but not the second one. I don't know. It'll be interesting. But this is the 9-man rotation that they seem to be locked into for now, probably till the trade deadline. I don't know. Maybe Shannon comes back at some point is healthy sometime before that. But yeah, I think it's good. I think it's healthy for a team to have a set group of guys that they're trying to go to, almost regardless if it's the right group. I think there's health in having it be the same guys night after night. This was fun, man. You got anything else on hit before we're done?
Nope.
Sweet. I like how your answer to that is always no. All of the other guests, that's not the case. Kyle goes, well, Britt goes, I got a whole 20 more minutes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like we exhausted literally everything you could talk about. But yeah.
I think we did.
Feel good about this last 63 minutes.
Yeah. So we're over now. I don't know. I want to gotta leave it open. Sometimes
I hear you. Usually, if I have anything to say, I know I'm not letting you finish here. If I have anything to say, I interrupt you during the first hour. To say whatever I wanted to say. I'm not just like sitting on it. If I hope we get to this, like we'll get to it in the first 15 minutes if I really want to get to it.
That's true. Yeah, it doesn't matter what outline.
Right. I look at the outline and it's like the Jimmy Butler like crumple it up and throw it over your shoulder thing. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, that's not what I want to talk about today.
That's fair. That's fair. I will see you at the game tomorrow night. It's been a while since we've been at Target Center. In the meantime, as always, you guys can be following Jace on Twitter at Jace Frederick, reading him in the Pioneer Press, and every Monday, Jace is on the show, record Monday mornings, and you can hear him consistently there. Coming up next, we're gonna have Chris Hine on the show. He was on the road with the team for the better part of this kind of Christmas over New Year's period of time. I'm curious to get some perspective from him on just kind of what the vibe was around the team, specifically Atlanta into Miami. Those were two very, very different games, sort of what the vibe was around there. So we'll have Chris on Tuesday afternoon. Once he gets back in town, that'll come out kind of right before that game, but hopefully it'll be a little bit more big picture on what the Wolves have done for the last few weeks, and then we'll keep moving, get Britt and Kyle in here later in the week. But yeah, until then, he's Jace, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah. Hope you dancing